Hi, it's Morgan with 1455. It is our mission to advance the art and craft of the written word and to build a dynamic and innovative creative community. We offer a variety of free online and in person programs, which are fully supported by our sponsors and by viewers like you. If you would like to make a donation of any amount, please visit 1455litarts.org and click support. Your contribution will be greatly appreciated. We'll see you on the next one.
Hey everybody, Sean Murphy with 1455. Thanks for checking in and being part of our ongoing series here, the 1455 interview. All of these interviews are fun and special for me, but some perhaps more so than others. I am absolutely delighted and honored to welcome Douglas Stuart, who you may have heard about, and you may have heard about his book, Shuggie Bain, which has been nominated for the National Book Award. So it is a tremendous honor for 1455. Douglas was also part of our literary festival this summer. So when this is over, I'll make sure I post links to the panel he was on then. And as a quick teaser, because we haven't announced it formally yet, we're going to have an author series event with him in December. So more of that to come. Today, we're going to get down to business and talk about our 1455 questions. Let me introduce my special guest. Douglas Stuart is a Scottish-American author. His debut novel, Shuggie Bain, is a finalist for the National Book Award. It's to be translated into 11 languages. He wrote it over a 10-year period and is currently at work on his second novel entitled Loch Awe. His short stories, Found Wanting and The Englishman, were published in the New Yorker magazine. His essay, Poverty, Anxiety, and Gender in Scottish Working Class Literature, was published in LitHub. Born in Glasgow, Scotland, he has an MA from the Royal College of Art in London, and since 2000 has lived in New York City. Douglas, thank you for being here and welcome to the not so hot seat of 1455.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Absolutely a pleasure. So as promised, I will put us on the clock and we will get right down to business.
All right.
Douglas, could you name the first book that made you want to be a writer or a book that just changed your life?
Oh, I think a book that absolutely changed my life was Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. I think that was I think actually, to be fair, that was the first book I ever read for pleasure that was sort of outside of the school curriculum. I was about 16, but it was also the first time I think I fell in love with a character, where I felt so invested in the character and the sweep and the doom, and you know it's going to end badly for poor Tess, but you just can't help sort of be in love with her in that way. And I mean, Hardy is so close to my heart. I love Jude. I love the Mayor of Casterbridge. But there's something about Tess especially, I think, that is such a sympathetic character that I think of her all the time.
Great answer. And the first time that particular book has come up. So always love adding new ones to the fold. So thank you for that. If you could, who would you say is your most profound artistic influence? You can name one.
I can't name one. But, you know, coming from the visual arts, you're sort of taught to be a bit of a magpie. And so I take a lot of influence from lots of different places. But as far as my writing is concerned, one of the biggest influences on me are actually playwrights. I'm an enormous Tennessee Williams fan, Joe Orton, even Alan Bennett's monologues, just the sort of the Talking Head series that he does. I love how playwrights approach dialogue and what they reveal and the compression of it and what it really always tells you about character's true nature. Like one of my favorite things is actually the Alan Bennett monologues. And so when I'm even writing and I'm trying to sort of work on characterization, I think a lot about how playwrights approach it because they tell so much about a character with such economy of space that I think a lot of writers could learn from playwrights.
Absolutely. Okay, another impossible one, but fun. Is there an album or movie or both that you can recommend without reservation?
Yeah, I think there's maybe two movies that I love above all. I love Kes by Ken Loach, which is based on A Kestrel for a Knave by Barry Hines. The story of, for anyone that's not seen it, you know, story of a working class boy growing up in Northern England who is just on the cusp of manhood and is for sure about to be sent down the mines. But life is really hard for young Billy Casper at home, and he finds a hawk, like a kestrel hawk. And in these moments of sort of training this hawk, his spirit soars, and he sort of transcends all the all the, I guess, the violence at home. And then sort of quite similar to that, I love Winter's Bone, the story by Ree Dolly. I think that's just such a beautiful movie. And it's one of those movies that I think it really takes you inside that sort of Appalachian community when she and the neighbors. I don't know if you've seen it, Sean, but it's oh my God, it's so beautiful. And the scene where they're playing music and they go to the kitchen, but she's looking for her murdered father. It's just I love that movie.
If I'm not mistaken, wasn't that I think that was the official arrival of Jennifer Lawrence, which made everyone take note that she was an actress to be reckoned with, and of course she has become just that.
That's right. And when she's on the, I mean, I think she was a very young woman at the time, but when she's on the screen, you just cannot look away. She's so magnetic.
Yep. Yeah. No, I love that movie, and I'm glad to hear you champion it. Right on. Okay. Aside from your own work, what would you say, if you had to, proverbial gun to your head, best first or last line of any book ever?
It's hard to choose. I pulled a couple. I mean, I think one of the, generally, this breaks my own rule. Generally, in writing, I like lines that just take you right into the heart of the action and drop you right into the narrative right away. However, this first example breaks all my rules because I think one of the best opening lines in any book is from Italo Calvino's "If on a Winter's Night a Traveller." You're about to begin reading Italo Calvino's new novel, "If on a Winter Night a Traveller." Relax, concentrate, dispel every other thought. And so that's actually the kind of line I generally don't like, but I mean, it's just phenomenal. And then I pulled the other one, which is more of kind of what I like. And it's actually from Morven Caller by Alan Warner, a book that came out in the mid-90s and was subsequently turned into an amazing film. But it just opens, "He cut his throat with a knife. He near chopped off his hand with the meat cleaver. He couldn't object, so I lit a silk cut." And so just that sort of like absolute violence, and then she decides she's going to have a cigarette.
Yeah, yeah. Good stuff. And, regarding Calvino, most writers can't pull off that kind of line. Most writers wouldn't even have the audacity, but when you have a certain heft, you're entitled, I guess, to take some liberties and kind of throw your weight around as writers seldom are able to do.
Exactly. I'm probably too intimidated to even try it. So I say I like simple openings because I could never achieve anything else myself.
Well, he has to be that guy, so none of us have to be. Someone has to be that person. How about an underrated author that you'd like to give a shout out to?
I don't know that there's a single underrated author. I think, obviously, you can tell by my accent that I grew up in the UK. And so I think there's a genre of authors. I always like to see, I do think that people who write working class narratives or who are working class writers are often overlooked. I mean, certainly growing up in the UK through the 70s and the 80s, everything felt like it was controlled from London and was all about an upper middle class gaze or a very sort of high academic in crowd. And so it left a lot of sort of like working class narratives to the side. And so I love Alan Warner, as I said, but even thinking about like Agnes Owens or Kerry Hudson wrote a beautiful book this year about growing up in poverty, Kit Duvall. So there's so many, but I like to be able, I think we don't represent class evenly across literature. And so I always think that the working class writers are underrated.
Absolutely. Let me second that and also say that, I think that perhaps is one of the many reasons stateside we found, and it's a worldwide thing, but, refusal to pay attention to that or even care about it is one reason we have these tremendous disconnects politically as well as culturally. So, I do think, and your debut is helping the cause. I do think there's going to be more of that. I think the window is opening a bit. So more power to that movement of sorts. I think we'll all be better for it.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like the conversations around diversity in publishing are starting to really open up, which is exciting.
Absolutely. All right, let's get down to brass tacks. Why have you not read Moby Dick? Or if you have, is there a classic that you've been meaning to get around to?
I when I was a young man, I tried to read Moby Dick because someone told me there was homoerotic undertones to it, and so I really tried because I wanted that nugget. I wanted to see like queerness represented on a page, and I don't know why I fell away. I don't know. It wasn't that I wasn't enjoying it. It's just perhaps I wasn't the reader for it. And so I should return to it. I apologize because I know it is a classic. I think the only thing that people are always surprised that I've never read, especially after reading Shuggie, and Shuggie is quite a classical novel. It's quite old-fashioned in its structure, but I've never read Dickens, or I've certainly never read more than a few pages. And so that's another big blind spot in my reading.
Which is surprising. That's actually, yeah, that's interesting. Interesting. Yeah. And also allow me to apologize. So it is Shuggie. I've heard in interviews both, and I went with Shuggie. I should have checked with you first, because that's bad form to not even know that.
Actually, it's fine. I don't mind what anyone calls it as long as they're talking about the book. I can't.
Fair enough. Okay. So we've kind of danced around this, but maybe expound. Is there a single theme or topic that your work tries or tends to address?
Well, I think in terms of Shuggie, there's the book is known as talking about poverty quite clearly, especially sort of the limits that women in poverty face, and their mobility, their hopes for a brighter future. It is the story of a single mother who is sort of disintegrating under a patriarchal society, and also under the Thatcher government, who's making all the men unemployed. And so that covers misogyny, it covers a little bit of homophobia, it covers powerlessness. But for me, those are the kind of the themes, or those are the backdrop to it. But I always think my work is much more about love and belonging. It's about, my characters are always looking for where they fit in the world, and they often don't. They're often excluded. And so it's about isolation, it's about hope. And then certainly it's about the courage it takes for men or for boys to be gentle or to be kind in very violent places. And so I don't know if there's a single theme, but it's kind of, those are things I always seem to return to.
Yeah, and it's clearly very personal for you on a lot of levels, and I'll look forward to taking a much deeper dive on that on December 1st, when we really kind of tear into the narrative and the ground that we want to tread lightly on, which is to associate the writer with the writing. But I think in your case, it's clear that your sensibility is informed by a lot of your experience, but more on that. So to be continued on that. For sure. I have gotten in the habit of combining the next two questions, because the answers are following a certain theme, which is the notion of routines, writing routines, and writer's block. So do you experience or believe in either? And if so, how have you dealt, or how do you set your routine if you have one?
That's a good question. My routine is still in flux. So you know me for my debut novel, but I'm actually working on my third at the moment. And I've found, much like children, the books have come to me in different ways, or they have personalities of their own. When I was writing Shuggie, I was working full-time in another industry. I was actually working in fashion and textiles in New York. And so I would go to the studio at 8 o'clock in the morning and not come home till about 10 o'clock at night. And so I found I had to write Shuggie in the margins of my life. I would work a little bit in the morning. I'd work on the subway. I used to love a long-haul flight. I would be sent to factories in China 4 times a year. And so 16 hours where no one could reach you was like any writer's retreat. It was the best thing. And so Shuggie sort of came in that way. And then by the time I worked on my next book, Loch Awe, I actually had quit fashion. And so I could sort of dedicate most of my time to writing. And so that came incredibly quickly. And I could focus on it. And so I'm still trying to figure out what my routine is as I head into my third novel. But I don't really believe in writer's block, but I do believe in good and bad days, and I believe in knowing yourself as a writer. Some days I wake up and I force myself to go to the page, and I know I'm irritated, or I'm melancholy, or I'm too distracted. And sometimes I can do more harm than good. And so what I'm trying to sort of calibrate for myself and figure it out is just when I should say it's not going to happen today, without giving myself an easy pass, because I think that gives you block. And so just trying to know myself a little bit better.
Brilliant. And I that's another side tangent we could take, but so I have envy and admiration for the writers that are, monomaniacal and religious, but some of these writers that are so productive, it's they write every day and you kind of can tell. Maybe that's not the best thing. So I appreciate the refreshing humanity of that response and the honesty. Good stuff. Okay, how about a setback, artistic or otherwise, that maybe ended up helping put you on the trajectory that you find yourself on now?
Well, I mean, when we talk about Shuggie and when we look at the book, we're writing about a teenage boy that grows up in quite crushing poverty. And I myself didn't read a book, I think, until I was about 16 or 17. And it's because school was just bedlam. Books were seen as incredibly feminine things or incredibly introverted things, and they were just not what boys like me were encouraged to do. I come from a long line of manual laborers, and so the idea of like studying English or having your nose in a book was actually, for other boys in the housing scheme, would have been quite dangerous. I mean, it would have been a reason to be sort of attacked. And so only when I became a young man could I like find the inner peace and the outer peace in my environment to sort of focus on books. So I think, and that's reflective, I think, in Shuggie, but I think that was the biggest obstacle to writing. I was dying to study English literature at college, to go away and do it, but it was too late for me. I'd missed too much of it, and I hadn't sort of come off the right foot as a start. And so I had to almost go all the way around and have a different life and a different career, and then come back to writing on my own terms in my own time. So that's the setback, I think.
Well, I want to thank you, Douglas. I think that's probably the most meaningful answer I've gotten this far in this series, because we talk about part of the impetus behind this particular endeavor is to demystify what writing is and maybe take the seriousness down a notch and celebrate diversity and the need for more voices. But we often talk about kind of writers living in their heads and the luxury of writer's block. For a writer to talk about real setbacks and to thrive despite lack of encouragement or outside enthusiasm is a genuine act of heroism in my view. So I want to celebrate your achievement on so many levels there, and just kind of give you a high five from great. So good on you, and thank you for that response. That's beautiful. Maybe a good segue. How would you, if you could, define or explain what literary success means to you?
Oh, that's a good question. Surely it means to be remembered. For your book to have touched somebody long enough that they they think about it and they think about you, and they do that. Everything we live in is so temporary, and there's so much information coming at us all the time that I think literature is one of the last meaningful ways we can really spend 16 hours with someone and their attention and really sort of hold them there. The biggest compliment I ever receive on my work, and I don't get it all the time, but when I do get it, I think, that's why I do this, is when someone says that they're bereft at the end of the book, or that they ask me. I get a lot of emails saying, what happened to them? Where are they now? And of course, they're nowhere because they vanish on the last page. But the idea that people sort of read my work and then feel like the characters are theirs, or their care or their concern, I think is the most powerful thing. I think that's why I write. That's what success looks like.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I think, we're always kind of awestruck at this notion that it's something so personal that we've created. And of course, we recognize and come to accept and count on. Once it leaves the page, it exists in myriad ways that we have no control over, but that gives art immortality, which is probably the profoundest thing of all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, props to us both. We've kept right on track. The timer just went off, but I always allow time for the last question, which is, do you have a 1 minute or so exhortation for a beginning writer that's looking for advice?
I think, you brought it up, but writing is all about control. And when you publish, you sort of relinquish that control. You can't take your book back. You can't spend more time with it. It sort of leaves your hands. And I feel like we live in a society sometimes where people rush to that point. And the truth is enjoy the time you spend with your writing, enjoy the time you spend with your characters, and really sort of take your time with it and revel in it, and understand that this is a phase that will end. So, just really, really luxuriate in it. At the end of the day as well, when you're sort of writing, it's hard to like block out the opinions of the world and what's happening in the world. But no matter what happens to your book, its reception, whether people read it or whether people don't read it, the only person that will be left holding it at the end of the day is you. So be very sure that whatever you're writing pleases you first and that you stand by it. Because I think I see a lot of writers be influenced by trends or things they want to put on the page or things that are happening. And at the end of the day, like, the only person you can make happy is yourself. The only person you can guarantee to make happy is yourself.
Yeah, and I think the flip side of that, right, is if you do write something that you are not satisfied with or feel that you gave it your best, regardless of the reception, that's always going to haunt you. So it's really a self-reinforcing, and I think it's frankly what separates the professionals from the wannabes, that there's an integrity inherent in that process.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And the funniest things come out of your book to haunt you. And so you have to be sure that you stand beside it. And people, it's one of the most amazing things to do as a writer. One of the most incredible processes I've been through is with working with translators. But translators find every single part because they're the closest readers you'll ever meet. And so it's good to take time with your book and really believe in every word.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I have two things to say. Congratulations on this well-deserved success. I hope it continues to accelerate. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy and productive schedule to chat with us. And I'm already really looking forward to going deeper on December 1st, and we'll break into some more biographical and textual analysis.
Thank you, Sean. It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you for getting me back on my couch, but somewhere else in the world.
Right on. All right, we'll talk to you soon, my friend. And thanks. And for those of you watching at home, you're a very easy man to find, but for the benefit of those coming to you new, how would somebody find you online?
Oh, probably the best place is to go to Douglas D. Stuart, STUART.com, and that will take you to all my writing and all my social media feeds.
Fair enough. Go check it out, folks, and get ready for some promotion on our upcoming event. Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you follow us on our social media channels to stay up to date with what's new for 1455. And also, we would like to ask for your support. We depend on champions like you to keep us going. Visit 1455litarts.org and click support to make a contribution in any amount. We'll see you soon.